Alysrazor is one tough chick. She's hot and fired like Megan Fox and out for revenge. And if there's one thing I've learned in my dealings with Alice, is that sometimes you just have to fight fire with, yeah, you guessed it, overwhelming numbers and a superior strategy formulated and presented by the good people at LearntoRaid.com. We've got you covered on the second part. Now grab 24 friends and let's do this. Alysrazor is a 4-phase fight that repeats 3 times before entering a soft and rage state. We like to cover this fight as 2 phases here at Learn to Raid because much like a Michael Bay movie co-starring Megan Fox, it just makes sense. Alysrazor has around 230 million HP. Throughout the fight you will also need to kill voracious hatchlings and blazing talon initiates with around 11 million and 3 million HP each. You'll want to bring 2 tanks, 5 to 7 healers, and a balanced DPS makeup. Megan Fox. Alysrazor has a few new tricks on heroic difficulty. For starters, a new type of mob will spawn during phase 1. Herald of the Burning End spawns twice during each phase 1 and will immediately begin casting Cataclysm. This spell will deal immense fire damage to anybody close to the Herald and summon a Molten Meteor. This meteor kills the Herald upon spawning and will roll toward the outside of the room in a random direction. Allowing the meteor to reach an outer wall will cause it to shatter into 3 molten boulders. Smaller pieces of the meteor that will roll across the room in the opposite direction, knocking back and dealing mild damage to all players hit. Players can kill the living meteor to immobilize it and prevent it from reaching the outer wall. The meteor will also break line of sight. This is important because it is needed to avoid being caught in Alysrazor's Firestorm. Twice during each phase 1, Alice will cast Firestorm. This spell inflicts massive fire damage over 5 seconds to any player within her line of sight. When it ends, it will also destroy any meteor still up. Voracious hatchlings have much less health on heroic, but this is to account for the fact that 6 will spawn during each phase 1. Tanks will need to pick up their adds and kill them preferably before each Firestorm and Tornado phase. The rest of the raid will remain identical to normal mode, but these changes alone can make the fight seem much more straining. For starters, this is a fight where you will need to split up your raid. There are 2 primary ways to determine this. Send ranged up top to DPS the boss and keep melee on the ground to handle adds, or send melee up top and have range down. Sending range up will be higher boss DPS, but in reality, the decision should be based on which players perform better in which roles. DPS on the ground will need to split once more into 2 groups. These groups will be responsible for killing adds on the right side and left side of the room, depending on assignment. The tanks will need to determine between themselves which lava worms they want to consume. We split this up by top and bottom, but left and right can work just as well. Assign 2 healers to each tank and any extra healers will heal the raid and help on tanks when free. When the fight begins, it is a good idea to allow tanks and tank healers to grab feathers. This will help tanks get to lava worms quicker and allow tank healers to keep up without lowering their healing output. Extra feathers will be used by pre-assigned DPSers to follow Alice into the air. At this point, everything appears similar to normal mode. Tanks DPS down their hatchlings and drag them to lava worms to feed their hunger. DPS dashes between initiates, killing and interrupting them when appropriate, and the Air Force plays follow the leader. The differences begin when the Herald of the Burning End spawns. This mob will appear in the center of the arena and begin to call down a molten meteor. Once the meteor lands, ranged DPS on the ground must switch to it and kill it quickly. Upon spawning, it will begin to roll toward an outward wall and will break apart if allowed to reach one. If killed, the meteor becomes immobilized and harmless. It's helpful to have the meteor in a centralized position, so killing it quickly is always the best plan. Coming into contact with the meteor before it has been killed is not advised, as it will cause a headache, followed shortly by death. As stated, meteors that are allowed to reach an outer wall will break into 3 smaller molten boulders. These will deal mild damage to any player they hit and knock them back. They are fairly harmless and should be avoided. 2 molten meteors will be called down before each firestorm. The raid will need to hide behind one meteor to avoid the damage from Alysrazor's Firestorm ability. The moment the first meteor lands, switch all available ground DPS to it and attempt to kill it as close to centralized as possible. If your raid is successful at this, you can simply ignore the next meteor that comes down. If your raid is not successful, meaning the first meteor either reached the outside wall or is so close that the positioning for Firestorm will be difficult, then you must do a better job on the second meteor or wipe the Firestorm. To add to the headache, hatchlings will need to be killed just before or during each Firestorm. The meteor will despawn once this spell is finished casting, and soon after a new set of hatchlings will spawn. More feathers will be available to grab after each Firestorm, and this cycle will repeat twice during each phase 1. Once Firestorm has happened twice and hatchlings have spawned 3 times, the tornado phase will begin. Everything here is identical to normal mode. Players will need to dodge tornadoes and wait for Alice to burn out. Use this burn phase to light up Alysrazor like a Christmas tree, and make sure your tanks lock down the claw shapers that spawn here. At 50 molten power, the boss will reignite and blankets the raid in high AoE damage. This is where you'll want to run your cooldown rotation. At 100 molten power, she will knock back all players and return to the sky. At this point, phase 1 will begin again and the fight repeats from the beginning. Alysrazor relies on 2 tried and true tactics to defeat your raid. She requires you to pay attention for a long period of time, as the fight can be quite lengthy, and she relies on your raid to play smart. It's a tough combination to beat, but you can counteract these tactics by remaining focused on the task at hand. Don't be distracted by the pretty lights and butterflies, just remember your own job and trust your other raiders to do theirs. If you enjoyed this guide or found it helpful, bookmark us at LearntoRaid.com, subscribe to us on YouTube and Justin TV, and follow us on Twitter and Blip TV. Thanks for checking us out here at LearntoRaid.com. We hope this guide was helpful, and we'll see you at the next boss.
I wasn't feeling so good. I just didn't feel like playing anymore. So I went home, and I got all comfy and cozy and all scrunched up in front of my phonograph. And I sat there and I closed my eyes and listened to all the sweet music.